Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Britt Kanawha West Hancock Athletics Podcast. Dan Kroll here with episode 59. And tonight I have members of the 1987 state runner-up wrestling team from Britt High School. All the guys you see their little screen, they were either state qualifiers or an assistant coach down right below me here, and Coach Prehm. Welcome to the podcast, fellas.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. I'm excited for this one. Talk some wrestling from back in the day, the DeLeon era. Before we get to these young men, I recognize my sponsors like always. The goal is to raise money for the Sanger Legacy Fund. I have 14 sponsors for tonight, so thanks to all those sponsors. That is Nick Schmidt, Levi Dawn Trucking, Miller & Sons Golf Cars, Jay Hiscocks of State Farm Insurance, Kelly Real Estate, Eric Kroll of Ag Performance, Window World of Mason City, Swenson's Hardware, the Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise, Jade and Tyler Kalsdorf, Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, Daniel's Auto Collision, and Christy Dusenberry in her book, Before We Open Presents. That book you can buy on Amazon. Like always, I want to remind people about the Sanger Legacy Fund, why we do the podcast. We use that money that's given to help fund the West Hancock Hall of Fame, give scholarships to graduating seniors, support the athletic and activity funds, and any other community outreach programs. Please consider giving to Sanger Legacy Fund at sangerstrong.com, or if you want to sponsor the podcast, let me know. Way back when segment here, I have 4 episodes to highlight from past episodes if you want to watch them. 5 episodes ago, I had Kerry Van Winkle. 15 episodes ago, current Iowa Hawkeye football player Josef Smith. 30 episodes ago was Rachel Leerar, and which would be Coach DeLeon's granddaughter. And then 45 episodes ago was Chad Trulson. Get to a couple sponsors here, and then we're going to start with some introductions. The Jay Hiscocks team, State Farm team in Britt, is a proud supporter of West Hancock and the Sanger Legacy Fund. Give Jay or Lindsay a call at 843-3563. Kelly Real Estate has been in business for 63 years now. If you're looking for just the right starter home, the perfect forever home, a unique fixer-upper, or a transition into your retirement home, call Kelly Real Estate at 843-4102. Nick Schmidt is sponsoring tonight's episode as always. Nick is a 2000 West Hancock grad and wanted to give back. Thanks to Nick Schmidt for sponsoring tonight's episode. And then Jade and Tyler Kalsdorf are also sponsoring tonight's episode. Tyler and I played football together. He's a 2008 West Hancock grad, so thanks to the Kalsdorfs. And then one of my longest sponsors is Michael and Brianne Ewing of Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company. Locations in Britt, Kanawha, Clarion, Belmont, and Dow's. Find them online at ewingfh.com or on Facebook. Give them a call at 843-3839 or 762-3211. All right, fellas, here we go. 1987 wrestling team. Looks like Pat's back from his parent-teacher conference. Doug in the top right corner there, his video is not working, and Don is not running or exercising right now. He's bouncing up and down because he's in a tractor right now. So here we go, fellas. Paul, do you want to get us started with introductions, who you are, where you're living, what you're doing these days?
Sure. Paul Kumsher. I'm living in Britt yet. Been with Pritchard Auto Company for 26 plus years. I've got 3 kids, all out of the house now, and 2 of them married, 1 granddaughter. And so that's me in a nutshell.
All right. How about you, Don? Can you hear us, Don? There you go.
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Don Finch, still in Britt, farming with my dad and brother. Just got married a couple months ago.
Nice.
But enjoying life.
Yeah, and like I said, Don is literally in the tractor as we're recording the podcast. So that's a
real Iowan.
Real Iowa podcast right here. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go around to the other side to Doug.
I apologize about the video, but Doug James. I actually live in Ankeny, Iowa now. Been married for 26 years. I do have 3 kids, 2 in college, and then I actually have a second grader. So I have a young one. We had one late in life. So
Nice. What do you do for work, Doug?
I've been selling medical equipment for about 20 years now. The last spent the first 5 years in the OR, and in the last 15 years, I've actually sold imaging equipment to dentists.
Nice. Mr. Kelly.
Hi, Patrick Kelly. I'm coaching just at the middle school level now. I gave up the high school last spring. Me and Lisa are going on 29 years of marriage, 3 kids. We're empty nesters now. So that's a little bit about me.
All right. And missing from action tonight is Ron Finch. I almost said Ron Kelly. Ron Finch, he couldn't make it tonight, but I just think that opens it up. If anyone has any really good stories about Ron, he's not here to defend himself, so have at it. Coach Prehm, how about you? And give a little introduction.
Well, I taught school for 30 some years and coached, and I was in Britt for only 6 years, but we had some great wrestling and I had some great times in the art room. But the rest of my career I spent here at New Hampton. And we have 2 kids that are both married. Our son Nate lives down at Hudson, and he has 3 little girls. And then our daughter is married and lives in Des Moines area. And they have a boy and a girl. So we have 5 grandkids to follow and a lot of soccer and stuff. But I stay active teaching workshops in art, and I do a lot of kayaking and fishing and play a lot of tennis, racquetball. And the last 7 years, my wife and I have been going down to Florida in the winter times, which and do a lot of bicycling and along with tennis and stuff down there. So life is good. We're healthy and enjoying things.
Good deal. All right. Well, again, welcome, guys. I'm excited to have the 1987 wrestling team on here with me, whether at a school or a tractor or wherever they are. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, Coach Prehm, I want to kind of start with you. I'm going to go off my notes already, just right off the bat. The book I'm writing about Britt West Hancock football and wrestling, I discovered you were a pretty solid wrestler yourself back in the day. You want to talk real quick about your wrestling days?
Well, I had to be solid if I was going to wrestle these other guys here at Britt, because they darn near killed me, but I enjoyed it. And but yeah, I wrestled for Eagle Grove and had a good high school career, and then I went on to UNI and wrestled, and also got to wrestle some freestyle all-star teams down in Mexico City, and I went to Europe for a summer in freestyle. So the high school kids didn't really scare me except for their size, and yeah, coaching and teaching art are 2 things that they're things I love to do. So it really didn't seem like a job. They always say, try to have a career of something that you just enjoy doing, and I was real fortunate to do that.
What I find doing all these podcast episodes, everyone on here is way too humble. You said you had a good wrestling career in high school. How many championships did you win at Eagle Grove?
I won twice, and I won the freestyle championship that summer my senior year as well. So
there we go. Everyone always wants to avoid how good they were, and I'm like, just tell everybody you're good.
I probably would have done better as a sophomore. I could have done better, but these guys from Britt were so tough; they kept knocking me out of the state tournament. So
yeah.
But,
I'd say you still.
I'm not going to go there.
Still did all right, that's for sure. So, all right, let's get to 1987 here. You guys took home the 2nd place trophy in the traditional state tournament with the 5 wrestlers. Obviously, again, Ron's not on the screen here. The season before, 85-86, you guys were 2nd in the conference, lost to Osage by 6 points. You were the state runner-up that year as well, behind Lisbon. You say Osage, you say Lisbon, you say Britt, you think wrestling. I mean, right there's 3 pretty big names in Iowa high school wrestling. That season, they had 91 points to our 65.5. Sigourney was 3rd with 59. Riceville had 54.5 points. So that was going into the 1986-87 season. Someone talked briefly here. What'd you think going into that 87 season? Did you think you had a chance to win it as a team? what was kind of the mindset going into this 87 season?
I'll say just a short bit here, but wrestling, I've been around a lot of wrestling before that, and to go into the tournament there and to have the champions that we did and not win the tournament was very rare. And so we had excellent wrestlers. We really performed well, and to end up with second, you hate to be upset when getting second is great, but I thought we had a team that really had enough points to do it.
Yep.
And
I guess I remember, from time to time on these podcasts, again, I've shared with Dan that I've listened to all of them. I still have a couple of those to catch up on, but sometimes there's talk of Britt being a small school competing against bigger schools, and that kind of being kind of an unusual kind of thing. And I think for us in wrestling, it really wasn't. I mean, we competed against really the best in the state. I can remember, wrestling Dowling, for example, wrestling Mason City, those kind of schools that might seem unusual in other sports, but I don't remember us, like setting a goal of bringing home a trophy from state or being state champions as a team. But I knew that we knew we were capable of anything. And I can remember too, Lisbon, Don Bosco at the time were powers. I don't know. I think we probably would have felt like we really, really accomplished something, really did it upset if we would have knocked one of them off in that way. But no, it was, I think the expectations were high, but I think that they were kind of where they should have been given the success we had.
Yeah. And to give a little historical background, I'm writing the book right now, so I'm kind of right in the thick of all this. Britt wrestling was like one of the schools, the 50s, 60s into most of the 70s. And then from like 77, 78 to about 84, 85, there was kind of a string where we weren't winning championships or having state champions. And your group, kind of was the group that brought it back into prominence for those last handful of years, decade before Coach DeLeon retired. But there was a little bit of a string where we had guys still going to state, but it wasn't bringing home state titles, runner-ups, 3 or 4 state champions, 6, 7 state qualifiers every single year. So it was kind of your group that was that last stretch of dominance for Coach DeLeon as well. Anything else anyone wants to add going into that 87 season we're going to talk about?
Yeah, I knew when we came in, we were going to be pretty special. Not only from a standpoint of, state teams, state championships as we're talking about, but from a team, I knew we had a lineup up and down that was just, we were compete with anybody at any point in time.
Yeah. Don was a returning state champion, was 31-3. Pat was 3rd in the state that year, the year before, with a 33-1 record. Pat, how close were you to wrestling for a state championship in 86?
Yeah, so I got beat by John Corey from Coon Rapids, and I believe it was the quarters maybe. And to answer your question bluntly, not close.
Not close.
He was good. He spent some time at Nebraska, University of Nebraska after graduating, but that match, really sobered me up to there's levels involved in this thing, and I'm not at his level. I'm not sure I got majored in that match, but it was close, if not to being a major. Yeah, I wasn't close to beating John Corey.
Yeah. Oh, look at this, fellas. Mr. Ron Finch making a dramatic entrance.
All right.
Don, was that who you were talking to a minute ago? Let's give Ron a second to get on here.
Does he get called for stalling?
Yeah. Let him get connected here. To talking about Coach DeLeon here real quick. He was going into his 24th season as head coach, and the newspaper said he was confident it was going to be a good year. There was 36 guys out on the wrestling team. Besides you five, who were some of the other guys that wrestled on the varsity that year? Hey, Ron.
Oh, on varsity that year, we had Mike Grimmer, Byers, Greg Byers, Kevin Sanger, wasn't he one of them? That was also on there.
Steve Kelly.
Steve Kelly,
Hopshite.
Hobshite. Yeah.
All right.
So we had a pretty stacked dual team. There's no doubt about that.
All right, I'm going to ask Ron to unmute here so he can introduce himself quick. Ron, we're putting you on the spot. Can you unmute yourself there? I wish I could undo it for him. I don't think I have that ability.
I just
Give it-
unmuted my.
Yeah, you got to unmute yourself if you can figure that out. There should be a red button that has like a line through it. A red picture has a line through it, but
Bottom
get
left
that.
corner.
So Doug, let's talk about Doug quick while Ron's trying to figure that out. Doug, you transferred in from Buffalo Center Rake that year. Why did you transfer from BCR to Britt? And did you know my grandparents? I'm curious about the Mr. K's people up on Main Street.
Yes, I did. Actually, we knew him really well. You know, it's a kind of a great story about transferring in. I had wrestled at Buffalo Center for 3 years, and I had some decent success, but never really did what I wanted to do. And after my junior year, we had our coach left in between at Buffalo Center. Our coach left in between my sophomore and junior year, and we went from having only 13 or 14 kids out to having maybe 5. And the second half of my junior year, I was the only kid that wrestled, and I ended up wrestling the state tournament that year in '86 by myself, which was kind of a unique experience. And I was all set to transfer to Newman because I enjoyed football. I wasn't very big. I wasn't really a impact player, but I enjoyed the sport of football. So I thought I wanted to play a little football and wrestle at the same time. So I had kind of agreed to transfer to Newman. And there was a small article that came out that I was transferred to Newman, and Coach DeLeon reached out to my dad and just had a simple conversation. And I remember kind of the words to this day. And Coach DeLeon said to me, he said, "I can do more for your son than he can do for me." And you know, putting things in perspective, he surely did. Between Coach Prehm and Coach DeLeon, and really, I didn't play football at Britt, but I'll tell you, I learned a lot of valuable lessons from Coach Sanger as well. And you know, there's systems that work, and in small communities, when you have great coaches, you can take some good kids to make them really good. And I think, you know, at Britt, between the football program and the wrestling program, they really had a great system in place. And you know, I would say that what, you know, Coach DeLeon said to my dad, and the reason I ended up going to Britt in the end is I felt like it was probably the better spot for me to achieve some of the goals that I had that were unachieved in the past. So I did not decide to go to Britt, honestly, until the first day. I was kind of set to go to Newman, and then you know, through some perspective, you know, my dad had set me down, and we had visited at the dinner table, and just, you know, thought about, you know, our long-term goals, you know, where I wanted to go. And in the end, I knew that going to Britt was going to be much more impactful in my life than going to Mason City Newman. So I, at the last minute, decided to go to Britt and showed up the first day of school and signed up for classes.
Nice. And was there any backlash from anyone in Buffalo for you leaving, or did they understand the low numbers in your wrestling program?
You know, and I think in the beginning, you know, you're going to get a little bit of a little bit of pushback, but in the end, when we come back with a trophy, and I was able to, you know, make the stand, which I hadn't previously, that it puts all the critics to rest pretty quickly. So,
Yeah.
Honestly, we probably got more pushback from Newman than anybody because we had committed and they had agreed to, to waive some minor fees for me to go there. And I think they felt like that was not very respectful to do. But in the end, I had to make the right decision. And I felt like that Britt was the right spot for me.
And that probably cost you playing football that season and half your wrestling season, because at Newman, a private school, you can just enroll and go. A public school, you have to sit out, the eligibility rules, correct?
Yeah. I only wrestled 13 matches my senior year. I was not eligible, I think, until January, maybe. And now I'm gonna throw a number out here. You cannot quote me on it, but I was only eligible, I think, after January 10th, 11th, 12th, in that general area. And,
Yeah.
Don and Pat, or actually Pat had mentioned it earlier, I walked in that year, my first duel, and I had a small problem making weight that year. And I walked in and I had to wrestle the kid that got second that year in 2A and the guy that got fifth in 3A. And that was my first duel after really not wrestling for the whole year. So I got thrown right into the fire to start the duel off.
And what about you guys from the Brit end with Doug coming in? What kind of a boost did you feel like that gave you as a team?
Hey, I really loved it. And the reason I really loved it is because Doug's the one that kept me from state my junior year. So get him on my team was a whole lot better for me. Remember that, Doug?
I have a bad memory.
Yeah. Districts, Norris Springs.
I remember.
Yeah, well, I'm
That's all right.
glad Doug retold that story because I honestly wasn't aware of really any of that, of the backstory of it. I guess I just sit here, whatever it is, 35 years removed or whatever, and think, all of the talk of recruiting and getting super teams put together and whatnot, not just nationwide, that there's talk of that, and we were kind of the originators of that, I guess, with bringing Doug on and helping us bring home a trophy. But really, it's a pretty incredible backstory, and I had no idea about it.
All right. Well, I'm going to get to a few sponsors here, then we're going to dig into the season. My next sponsor is Daniels Auto Collision in Charles City. Owner Jason Daniels is a 1990 West Hancock grad. Go ahead and give Daniels Auto Collision a call at 641-220-3805 or check them out at danielsautocollision.com. The Showalter family and Window World of Mason City is a proud sponsor of the podcast. Once an Eagle, always an Eagle. Fly High Coach Sanger and Joey Showalter. Miller & Sons Golf Cars, just outside of Britt, is a family-owned operation with over 50 years of experience. Contact Skip and Jim Miller at 843-4132. Visit them online at millergolfcars.com. And then thank you to the Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise for sponsoring the podcast. Jared Winger in Britt is also the owner of Mojo Productions. He can be contacted at 515-480-1074 or check him out at brittcarcruise.com. All right. The season started with a 39-25 win over Hampton. Then you tied for the team title over in Milford with Spirit Lake with 101.5 points. And then you guys beat Garner 31-24. Was there much of a Britt Garner rivalry in wrestling like there was in some other sports back in the day, or what'd that look like in 86, 87?
Oh yeah, you never wanted to lose to Garner. Never. Yep, still the same back then as it is now.
Yeah. Were they competitive though in wrestling, or were you guys still better?
I was really surprised to see that the score was that close. I don't really remember it being like a heated rivalry in wrestling, but that score is really a very respectable score on their end, and I don't remember it.
Yeah, it should have been a lot worse than that. Don't you think? Must have forfeited a few weights.
Well, in writing my book right now, a lot of the stuff from the 70s, Brits upper weights at some point in time weren't the greatest. So sometimes they would forfeit a couple like 185 and heavyweight matches. you'd see they'd win a duel by 4. I'm like, oh, that must have been close. But then you see 12 of those points for the other team was by forfeits in those last 2 matches. So hard to say sometimes without going match by match through it. But going up next in the season, you were 4th at the Algona tournament. You guys beat Albert Lee. They were the top ranked large school in Minnesota at the time. Do you guys remember, was there any hype around that? You knew how good that team was going in at all, or didn't really have a clue at that time?
I did not.
Yeah, so they're ranked, I think, in the top 3 for the largest class in Minnesota.
Yeah, there again, I think our schedule was a very good schedule, and we saw that kind of competition kind of throughout the year.
Anything else? Let me throw this out here instead of just going through, meet by meet. Who practiced against who in the wrestling room? Who were like your guys' partners that you would spar against every single day?
I wrestled Pat a lot.
And what was that like? That's what I'm getting to. Like, I mean, were practices sometimes harder than the meets were because you were a state champ wrestling a state champ every day at practice?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and that was, me and Don wrestled, all year throughout the summer as well. And again, the humble thing would come up. Don wouldn't say this, but he was a junior national runner-up, which is, it was a huge thing back then. I mean, in the nation, Don was a junior national runner-up, and you don't see very many of those, and to have a workout partner like that day in, day out, absolutely the meets were days off.
John, what do you think?
Definitely the meets were fun and easier than practice. Yeah.
And in practice, were you guys like, was it keeping track of score, or whoever got so many takedowns? Was it pretty competitive, or was it just go after each other type of thing?
Oh, I imagine. Oh,
Yeah, I think a little of both probably.
Yeah.
Knowing
each other. We practice in the mornings. We practice after practice. We practice during practice. Practice when other people weren't practicing. So we got to know each other pretty good.
And Coach Prehm, who are you beating up on in the wrestling room?
Well, I tried to beat them all up if I could, to keep them humble, but that was a hard thing to do. I do remember going takedowns with them, and we'd go the best out of 5, and I'd always like to give them 1 and then get my next 3 or something. But usually that was the case. But these guys had some size on me. I was a little guy, and but I wanted to push them, and there was it was always fun when we had big meets coming up. I'm not sure of the year, but was it Eagle Grove and Dowling double duel in that lineup for 86 or 87? But what I remember and really enjoy is Eagle Grove and Britt was a big rivalry. And the year I was a junior in high school, we won over Britt by 1/2 a point. And so that was huge. And the legendary Hagen boys at Brent Hagen lost in the semis, which gave us a chance to win it. So there was a lot of rivalry there. And for me to be coaching at Britt was I didn't make the Eagle Grove people very happy, but I remember we were down there, and I think it was Dowling and Eagle Grove double duel, and they had a real strong lightweights. So I think we were behind like by 28 points coming into the middle weights, and we didn't lose a match after that. They didn't have the upper weights weren't their strong suit, and us Brit boys there, we got some falls and ended up winning. I think it was 30-28, which I had to head out of town real fast that night. So That was a great match, one that I remember because Mike Woodall was a teammate of mine back in the day, and he got beat by one of the Howlets in the state tournament, and so there was a lot of rivalry there, and just one that's always stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
One more thing on practicing, I was working out with the boys a lot. I really enjoyed it. It was therapy for me to still be able to wrestle and coach these guys. They were just such hard workers. One story that I tell people is that, when I was at Britt, these wrestlers, these Kelly boys and Finches and all these guys, they'd come in and wrestle at all times of the day and night, and not many schools let the athletes have a key to the building, and but there was never any problems, and I'm not sure how they got in, but we knew they were working out, and you don't see that in many other schools. And so Britt was a very special place, and I was very proud to be a part of their success there. So
it's like a liability anymore. Let kids into the school without, supervision, and it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So
yeah, you don't get to do those things, and we weren't supposed to be doing those things back then either, but we just did it, and
no one would care. Yeah.
but it was all positive, and things were in place, and they shut the doors and locked it up when they left, and we knew those things were going on, but that's just kind of reflects the character and the kind of kids that we had at that time there. They wanted to be good, and they were going to work extra.
Yeah, cool. Ron and Don, how much did you guys get to wrestle at practice? You guys go at each other a little bit?
Yeah, the beginning of that senior year, he started out at 155, so he enjoyed wrestling me and Pat, I think, for the first few months until he went down to 145. But is he on here?
Yep, he's right beneath you on the screen here. Ron,
am I on now?
You're on. There we go. Welcome. Finally.
Hey, hi, Ron.
Hey,
Took me a
Ron.
while to get-
Ron, are you in the tractor?
I'm in the combine.
All right. Again, we got a true Iowa podcast going on right now. We're farming and podcasting at the same time about wrestling. So there we go. All right, let's keep moving here.
Yeah, I did not
go
like
ahead.
wrestling Don and Pat. Those guys, when I started out at 145, 155, I remember grabbing Don and Pat's leg and they'd crush me down. But then when I went down to 145, felt like tree trunks. They'd crush me down pretty good.
Did Coach DeLeon still practice when you guys were in high school? Was he still getting in there with the smaller guys?
I think it kind of faded out a little bit in our time. So,
and I know it sounds like Billy Dahlman still kind of gets in there with some of the kids on occasion. So doesn't surprise me if some of those guys getting active in there. Yeah.
Some coaches are smarter than others, and one story I have is I was gonna do this little throw on Mr. Don Finch, and I attempted it, and he was leaning the right way, and he should have went flying through the air and onto his back, but somehow my wrist got crushed, and I went up to Coach DeLeon and I says, "I'm pretty sure my wrist is broken. I'm going to the hospital," and I went to the hospital, and I come back with a brace, but luckily it wasn't broken. But Don Finch, even when I watched him at Iowa, I'd watch him wrestle down there, and knowing what his style was and the things that you can and can't do with that guy, it was very entertaining to watch because he kind of didn't really follow the rules of gravity sometimes. So anyway, I paid for it even in practice there one time, but I enjoyed working out with those guys.
How long was it till you got back to wrestling with those guys? You wait 3 days, a week, or did you take some time?
my injury was, I think near Christmas break or something, but I was out for about a month, I think, before my arm was ready to go full speed again.
Yeah.
And as far as DeLeon, I'd just like to say, when I come in and started working with him and he really let me do a lot of things and brought some new things in that he didn't like. He didn't like someone throwing the legs on. And I remember, especially Ron, he got in on the legs and he was cranking people. And I remember there was this one kid, he was ranked #1 in the state. I told Ron, whether I believe it or not for sure, but I always said, Ron, you can beat this guy. And sure enough, he went out there but he'd throw the legs on. These guys would look like they're getting way too high. And I remember DeLeon, it just drove him crazy. He'd just hold his head and wonder how in the heck this is going to work. And, but they learned some of those techniques that I was learning at UNI a few years before. And it was fun to watch. My greatest thrill is watching these guys beat people that were ranked above them at some point. And, that's a coach's dream, I think, and that's a lot of fun.
Definitely. Was it just the two of you coaches, or were there others that helped that year?
Billy Dahlman, I think, was around, and I think that was, I don't know, Pat or Ron. You guys were, Don, you remember anybody?
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so
that's
too.
it.
I may think officially they're, just head and assistant, I think.
Yeah.
And it's Billy Dahlman was around. That phrase has been said for about 40 years now. So
Yeah.
that dude's a stud. Him and Lois are going to do a podcast with me in January or so, and that one, I'm excited for that one too. That's going to be a blast. But yeah, that guy.
Well, let me know how to watch that one. Yeah, I'd like to watch that.
Yep. I'll shoot you an email with the link to that. Yeah, he's got a motor. I'm a 4th grade teacher. I pushed the merry-go-round twice and pushed about 4 kids on the swing, and I about call it a day at that point. And here's Billy still wrestling with the kids all winter long. So kudos to him.
Yeah, not only that, and I just it's so Billy-like. I was watching a live stream of, I think it was I can't remember what it was a couple of years ago, but they just kept the camera rolling. It was a double duel, and they're cleaning mats in between duels. And like clockwork, right when the handshake line was over, Billy had that mop and he was doing the mats. I mean, he's just such a program guy, and so valuable to Britt West Hancock wrestling.
Yep, definitely. He's a Hall of Famer in waiting, that's for sure. All right, I'm gonna get to a few more sponsors, and then we're gonna finish up the season here. Christy Dusenberry from Indianola, here where I live. She wrote a children's book called Before We Open Presents. Shows us the real reason of the Christmas season. It's great to read with your kids before you open gifts. My wife and I own a copy. You can get your own copy on Amazon. I'll have that linked on the podcast post here tonight online. Levi Don Trucking is my next sponsor. Thanks to Levi and his trucking company for sponsoring the podcast. You can call him at 641-860-0077 or look him up on Facebook. Swenson's Hardware in Britt is your local independently family-owned hardware store since 1977. They serve the entire community. You can check them out at swensons.doitbest.com. And then my brother, Eric Kroll with Ag Performance. You can contact Eric at 515-341-3361. If you're looking for a higher net return on your fields, that's Eric Kroll with Ag Performance, 341-3361. All right, moving on to the second half of the season here. This is where Doug got to get into some action here, except he couldn't quite wrestle yet against Buffalo Center Rake. You guys had a triangular with Lake Mills and BCR. Beat the Bison 64-6. Did that kind of hurt that you couldn't wrestle against your old teammates? Apparently there were some guys on the team. They scored 6 points and were in a triangular. Was that kind of hurt, Doug, not being able to be in that meet?
No, I was fine with that. It must have been a forfeit, I would guess.
Yeah, so didn't miss a whole lot.
No, sir.
You guys also beat Forest City 43-16. And then a crazy triangular I put in my notes with Charles City and Eagle Grove. Charles City won 3A that last season. Eagle Grove won 2A, and you guys were the 1A runner-ups. What was that like going into that meet? They said the gym was packed early. People were there early looking for a spot to sit. You guys lost those duels in the triangular. You lost 37-16, I think was the score for both of them. But just that experience of wrestling the 2A and 3A state champs, what was that like?
I do remember kind of remember about it is the environment. And, you know, again, you know, we had a really good schedule, but, you know, those kind of times where it was some high level wrestling, and it was just fun, just the environment itself. I don't remember, you know, exactly the outcomes of those duels. I just remember it was just a intense. If I remember right, you know, watching the other two teams wrestle each other was part of that fun environment as well. But you know, kudos to Coach DeLeon and Prehm for putting a schedule together like that. And you know, I don't know, tailoring it maybe to the team that we were at that time. I don't know before or after if they did that sort of thing. But yeah, it was I do remember the gym that day, just the electricity in it.
Do you remember who won the meet between Charles City and Eagle Grove that night?
I do not.
Fairly irrelevant. I was just curious if anyone remembered.
Yeah, I
Anything
very
else?
much so remember that meet. Just walking in there and being able to wrestle a 3A school that had that much success the year before was a great, you know, and the environment was just electric in there. I remember walking off the mat from my match with Charles City, which I won, and telling Mike Grimmer as he goes out there, I says, "You got to win this, man. This feels incredible coming off and winning on a 3A school." So.
After that meet, you guys lost to Osage 31-24, beat Mason City 30-26, and then the NCAA, the NIC tournament, North Iowa Conference tournament was up after that. Osage won their 9th straight title that day. Fun fact, at that point, there was the 13th North Iowa Conference tournament. Britt won the first 4, Osage won the next 9 up to this point. So in 13 years of the conference tournament, only 2 schools had won the team title. We got second, like I said, to Osage. Ron, Don, and Pat, you guys all won conference titles. You were all 23-0 at that point of the season. Doug and Paul, do you guys remember how you did at conference that year?
I believe I got third.
I took the day off.
Took the day off, like as in you didn't wrestle or you didn't do so well?
I was having some problem with my weight, to be honest,
okay.
at that time. So
Gotcha.
we finished the last duel, and Coach DeLeon had a big event. He made some food, a lot of food, said it would be fine. Everybody would make weight. Well, there was one dude that did not make weight. So
the new guy couldn't figure it out, huh?
I was baptized very quickly after that. I did not miss weight again.
Was Coach DeLeon mad at you?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Was Coach DeLeon upset with you after that?
You know what? The crazy thing, it was kind of a unique situation. And I did cut a fair amount of weight that year. And Coach DeLeon actually, he was refereeing. I think he was refereeing in Minnesota at the time. So it was the night before the conference tournament, which would have been Friday. And I think Don actually walked me in, and Coach Prehm was sitting in the coach's room, and they put me on the scale, and it was not a pretty situation. So they called Coach DeLeon, and by the time that they called me back, I had already made it back to Buffalo Center, and I had gained about 10 pounds by that point. And I did not, obviously I did not make it. So I had made the finals 3 consecutive years. I won it as a freshman, got second as a sophomore, and won it again as a junior. And then my senior year, I was about 12 pounds overweight that morning, so I did not participate.
Oh, geez. I would assume it was like a half a pound or a pound. 12 pounds. That was about the
Wow.
last thing I thought you'd say there.
Well, I was closer until I knew that I wasn't going to make it. And Coach Prehm probably could tell the story or talk about it. But I remember Don walked in with me when we were getting on the scale, and it was not a pretty situation. I was probably, to start the week, I would guess I was 16 or 17 pounds overweight to try to get down, and I was within 2 or 3 pounds, and then it just was not coming off very well. So then we didn't think I was going to wrestle. So then I proceeded to eat and drink, and then I gained some weight. So
speaking of the whole weight loss thing, what did you guys do if you had to lose weight fast? What was kind of the method back then?
Sweat.
Sweat.
Well, you had to run.
Run and sweat.
Run.
But did you wear like those suits? I know when I was in high school, they'd have those like almost like rubber sweatsuits they'd put on just to like about dehydrate themselves. Did you guys have any like that? Just put on sweatshirts and sweatpants and heat up the wrestling room more than anything?
Yeah,
I
that
don't know.
wrestling room must have been 100 degrees.
I don't think you needed them.
Yeah, just get in there and do it.
They had the big red blankets they threw over you.
Yeah.
you know the funny story, and I don't think anybody's mentioned it, but if I may jump in real quick, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to start the year, Pat started at 167 and was a state champ at heavyweight. And I would like to find somebody else in the history of the state wrestling tournament that started at 167 and moved up to heavyweight. And, you know, he was the same situation. He was cutting quite a bit. He got third the year before at 167 as a sophomore. And him and a kid probably from Lisbon were the best two kids at 67. And Pat was struggling to make some weight as well. And then you had a returning state champ named Don Finch at 185. And they had wrestled so many times, and, you know, Pat just agreed to move up to heavyweight, which was kind of a unique situation. And to put it in perspective, the best story really is at 167 that year, you know, Pat and a guy named Greg Buttress, which is an assistant coach at Lisbon, I believe to the day, were ranked number 1 and 2. And Buttress ended up winning 67 that year, and then Pat won heavyweight and Don won 85. And we wrestled. That was the first year we ever had a dual meet state, and they actually both went down to 85 and wrestled each other in the dual meet and in the dual meet state tournament, which was absolutely just an awesome experience. And Pat ended up beating Buttress that day at 185, and it's you know, quite a story, because Pat probably, and I said it, you know, the pin doctor, the guy that posts a bunch of stuff online, posted a picture of Pat Kelly winning the state title as a junior year, and I just said, I wonder what weight Pat Kelly weighed in at the state wrestling tournament, because he had to weigh in, I think, at 184 and a half, within a half a pound of 185 where Don was. And he would have to drink water to make that weight, because he couldn't get down to 67. The weights were stretched out as 18 pounds in between those. So Pat had to move all the way to heavyweight and won the title that year. And then him and Buttress, the guys that were ranked 1 and 2 that year at 67, ended up wrestling later on at 185, and Pat beat the kid, which was just a great story.
And Pat, my dad always told the story, and I'm pretty sure it was you. He's like, this guy, and it had to have been you because you were so much lighter at heavyweight than the other guys. You know, a lot of times, I'm not a wrestling guy. You probably noticed that already, but a lot of times you kind of circle each other, you square up. They said, no, this Pat guy, if I'm remembering my dad's story correctly, you pretty much just walked up to the opponent and grabbed him and started, you know, destroying him. Was that you, or was it one of the Finch boys he was thinking of? I can't remember.
Probably one of the Finch boys.
Yeah, it was like there was no kind of pussyfooting around with, you know, getting locked up. It was like, here we go. And he would just go at him. Time
out. I have to add something here.
Yep.
Doug's story there, that does bring back memories to me, because I remember Pat drinking milk, drinking water, trying to make weight to be the heavyweight. And but I tell you what, we had no doubts that he could win state the way he was wrestling. And so I thought that move was awesome. And I've told that to, I've coached many years after I left Britt, and that's a story I've told the kids. You don't have to cut weight all the time. Just get out there and get the job done. But I do remember, Pat, the reason we had to get some tougher competition is because we had some guys that were hurting people, and then we've had some big lifts and they were slamming them. And I remember telling Pat, you have to let them down easy, and we never wanted to lose somebody for a slam, like in the sectionals or districts. And Pat would get pretty pumped up, and he didn't go out there, shake hands and test the waters as to what this guy's going to do. He just did what he was going to do. And but when he got him up in the air, we had to go, slow him down, Pat, and don't let him down easy, so. But it's great to have a team of kids like that. And Pat was definitely an animal, was one word used many times when Pat was wrestling there his junior and senior year. So, but DeLeon did. He got the best out of all the kids. And like you say, we didn't have high numbers, but we got a lot of, I think kids felt good, when they were wrestling for DeLeon. So I learned a lot from him.
Yeah. And it's funny you say numbers weren't high. I found out 36 kids on the wrestling team that year. I think most high school wrestling teams would kill for 36 guys right now. So it's crazy how the times have changed a little bit. I think a lot of schools have 20, they'd be thrilled right now. So
I've been real fortunate to come from schools, Eagle Grove and then Britt, and then over here at New Hampton, I coached here for over 20 years, and we always had a lot of kids out, and it's really sad when I see large schools, or just a lot of schools these days, with the low numbers, and because you really need a lot of it's just great to have a lot of kids in the room to work out with, and just makes it a much more pleasant year. So I agree with you though. 36 is pretty good number for Britt.
Yeah, but back then, compared to in the past, what's that done?
When they had the chart on the wall with the names at each weight, and it was nice to see. I liked it. I don't know. I guess I went in there when I was a kid. My older brothers were wrestling and stuff, and then you seen 3, 4, 5 at one weight. That's always awesome. You got a mini tournament just at one weight. You're bound to get tougher.
Yeah.
My freshman year. Yeah, my freshman year, I tried out for junior varsity.
Yeah. I wish it was that way. I don't know why kids aren't going out, or if there's just less kids, or both.
Yeah, and I tell you what, for a little while, Britt kind of turned into a basketball school in the last 10, 12 years, going to state boys and girls. And there are people I went to college with were like, I thought you guys were a wrestling school. And it's cyclical in the small schools, and never know. So but I think they have a lot of participation throughout all the sports right now for being how small we are. So all right, let's wrap up the regular season here. You guys ended the season by beating Algona 49-7, Clarion 54-6, and then you went to Belmont for sectionals. You got 8 through to districts. Would be Ron, Don, Pat, Doug, Paul, Mike Gremmer, and I put in my notes that he upset a kid to qualify for districts, and then Greg Byers and Kevin Sanger. We won the sectional title and qualified for the regional duels, which was a new concept that year, the region, the state dual tournament. What was that new concept, the possibility that not just having the traditional state tournament, but also being able to win a state title or go to state as a team? What do you guys remember about that?
As a coach, we definitely had to think about what we were trying to do, and there was so many mixed feelings about it, because the emphasis in Iowa was to win that individual title, at first. But some coaches really got into the team concept, and I think it helped get more kids out because you really needed to fill the weights. But then when it got time to actually compete, do you want your kids, which tournament means the most to them, and how's it gonna work out? And we've seen a lot of things down at the dual championships where they're not wrestling all the best kids, and so there's a lot of mixed feelings on it, I think, and there still is today to some extent.
Just a handful of years ago, they switched it to the day before the traditional tournament. And that was ridiculous because I think like Waverly, Shell Rock, and some of those bigger schools that were like nationally ranked, they qualified for state duels, and then they didn't wrestle any of their state individual tournament guys in the dual state tournament. And then they got destroyed, which they didn't really care. They just wanted guys to compete at state. And I think, didn't the state switch that to where it was pretty much the guys you had in the regional duels, you had to wrestle them, or so they did something like that because they were kind of embarrassing. Yeah, kind of
They should have
embarrassing.
if they didn't, because it doesn't make sense to wrestle the day before
Yeah,
going to the traditional tournament. I think when we qualified back in the day, it was a week after, or should maybe even be 2 weeks, but
It was a week after, yeah.
It was
Yeah,
the weekend.
everybody, then people are gaining weight and stuff too, so the weights move around. So I don't know if I still agree with either way. Maybe
Yeah.
like how college did it. They had it during the season, a dual tournament. That makes more sense to me than high schoolers after you work your whole year to win a state title. Then you got your team going in, and some have had time off or whatever, so they're not going to make weight and whatever. But
yeah.
so it's less important to me. I don't know.
Yeah, the traditional is always, I think the traditional is always going to be the number one priority for anybody that is in that spot. So
it was still great to have our team go down there. It got definitely memories from that.
Yeah.
Like Doug said about Pat, and I wrestled heavyweight against
The kid from Griswold,
Griswold.
right?
Yeah, he was super heavyweight, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and he
but
moved
he was-
down, yeah.
Super heavyweight champ, and I was 85 champ.
Well, and honestly, if you put it in perspective, I'll say Paul Kumsher's story too is, Paul had mentioned that I beat him out the year before to go to state, and he maybe weighed a little bit less than me going into the season, but he wrestled a weight above me. But for duels, I was having a hard time making weight, so Paul went down to 26, and the kid from Lisbon at the time, one of the Light brothers, which was either 2 or 3 timer. Paul, 3-timer, right? So Paul went to state that year at 32, and this kid won it at 19, and they wrestled at 26 that year. And honestly, Paul had him beat dead to rights. Paul had him beat till about the last 30 or 40 seconds, and then he ended up losing by, I think, a point. And
A point.
point. Yeah. Paul had him beat 3-timer at 19, and then with the story about Pat and then Don but that year was the first year of dual meet state. And, for me, it was kind of a unique situation because I had never been around such a great team and a great group of coaches. So just, the year before I wrestled in the state tournament by myself, which 2 coaches and 1 wrestler was kind of a unique experience. So to be able to have the camaraderie at the dual meet state, at the individual state tournament meant so much to me that at the dual meet, it probably didn't mean as much. And, Steve Kelly, we had that year, we actually got 3rd in districts at every weight from 126 up to heavyweight. So we had somebody in the top 3 at districts that year. And honestly, we had 2 or 3 more kids that could have made the state tournament, should have. So we really were stacked, going up from 26. But, Steve Kelly that year, which later is an absolute stud, obviously, he was a freshman. He got forced at 119, and he had to cut more weight than I did. And I mean, that kid later on just dominated. And by the time so he didn't make it to state. So by the time we went to districts, he was on full feed and lifting weights. And he wrestled 132 for us at the dual meet, because he had been on full feed and later becomes just an absolute animal like we knew he was going to. So, it was kind of a unique experience because there wasn't a lot of kids that wrestled the same weight that they wrestled either during the season or at the state tournament. And some of the highlights were, Mr. Kumsher really, should have beat that 3-timer, and Donnie goes up, and the kid from Griswold was a super heavyweight. Donnie wrestles, and then Pat beats the kid that was, they're ranked 1 and 2 at 67. So, that's kind of the experience. I think, everybody can kind of debate a little bit about, did it make sense the week after or the day before? But it seems to be now they actually have moved it before sectionals and districts, and I don't think there's going to be a sectionals anymore, which makes a little bit more sense. But just the experience of going through that is just definitely a memory. And Dan, I would thank you for putting this all together, because we kind of forget some of these thoughts until we get together as a team and just kind of discuss them. But there are so many great memories from everything.
And you mentioned districts. That was in Britt that year. You 5 obviously were the 5 that made it through, and that's why you're on the podcast here. And then at state, you guys got second to Don Bosco, who's still a traditional power 35 years later, winning titles. They had 118.5 team points to our 96.5. So that'd be 22 points. We edged out Lisbon by half a point. I got who won the match that got us second and not third? Who's going to take credit for that right now? Whoever's fastest, go for it.
That was
All of
Don.
us. Donnie.
I'd vote Don as
Don
well.
had to pin his kid to win to get second,
Okay.
wasn't
So
it?
is-
It could go anyway. Somebody
Yeah.
could have pinned somebody somewhere along the line.
Every win got points, so
Yeah.
we all contribute.
The crazy thing I think about that is we beat Bosco in the state finals in two of those weight classes. Ron Finch beat a kid from Bosco that year, Purdy, I think, and then Pat beat the heavyweight Mashik at heavyweight that year. And that year, Bosco beat us, and they had 6 kids get second or third. They had not one champion and not one kid worse than third, to put that in perspective. And then that year, we had 5 kids go. We had 4 guys place, and we had 4 guys pin or tech our way into the semis, I believe, that year. So we had bonus points galore. And then, Pat obviously was a 2-time state champ, and Donnie was a 2-time state champ, and Ron was the 1-timer. Ron could have won it numerous times as well, and finally got his chance his senior year to really to pour it on. But we had a lot of bonus points that year, and we really did have a wonderful team and a wonderful coaching group to kind of put it all together. So there's some unique stories, but you said to keep it clean, so we're going to keep all those stories out of the mix.
The after party, go ahead. Yep.
No, we never had any of those, but
Yeah, there's
There's
actually a funny story with my brother Steve, having to actually cut weight to make 132, and older brothers coming home from for another time. But a funny story at the state tournament. So Don, and Don, was it in the semis where you had that really tough match against the Pleasant Valley guy, or
Trevor Clark.
Trevor
Yeah.
Clark.
Yeah.
Okay, so this kid's a beast. In fact, he became a Division II national champion, several years later for Southern Illinois.
Yeah.
Anyway, Don, so this is a tight match. I mean, this kid was good, and the match came down to the wire, and Don pulled this match out, and the previous summer we had met a lot of kids from different places through our summer wrestling, and one of them was then a current freshman at the University of Northern Iowa, and he was there at the state tournament watching. Well, probably in June or July of that previous summer, he had left his glasses in Don's car or somewhere, and Don kept them for him. And so Don, just seconds after stepping off the mat in this huge, one of the biggest wins of his whole career, this kid was sort of near Matt's side, and just to congratulate Don. And Don immediately said, "Hey, I've got your glasses," and reached into his gym bag and gave him his glasses back.
I didn't know that.
I knew I'd run into him sooner or later.
No better time than the present, right? Yeah.
But I was ahead of him that year the whole time. The year before, I had to cradle him with 5 seconds left. That was a tough match.
Was that in the semis as well? Your junior year down?
That was second round.
Second round.
Quarters.
Yeah.
DeLeon and Prehm are over there. It's like, 3-3. I was like, oh, I just, as long as I got 2, I'm still in it. I remember that. I was like, I still get a wrestle, but I got 3, so I didn't have to do more in overtime. So
Work smarter, not harder.
yeah.
A story about Don as well is, I was working out or getting ready for a match one time, and Don would just kind of, he was as easy going as possible, and until you got him on the mat, and he would not. His warm-ups were limited. I'll just leave it at the word limited. But I'm like, how the hell? Excuse me, I finally said a bad word. But how the heck does he walk out there with no hardly warm-ups and just kick the crap out of kids? It was just great. I mean, Don's demeanor and his personality just was very easy. And Pat's story about the glasses, kind of hits the nail on the head. But he was just, for how ferocious and how talented, and Coach Prehm said it as well. He did things at a big weight that most kids cannot. He had definitely had a knack for wrestling, and it was a joy to watch. When I was there for the year, so it was just a pleasure.
Let's roll on to actually, Paul. How you lost in the first round at state? Was that a close match? Do you remember? Did you have a chance to move on?
Actually, I lost to the state runner-up, and back then, if you lost to a wrestler that made it to the finals, you got pulled back in. So I actually had a second match that year.
Okay.
I lost that one, obviously, because I did not place. They placed the top 6. So my claim to fame is I was in the top 8, but I didn't get recognized for the top 8. But anyway, but that was Jeremy Ask I lost to that second match, and I believe he went on to be a 3-time state champion. But yeah.
Was the tournament Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Was it a 3-day tournament or was it a 2-day?
I believe it was just 2 days, wasn't it?
Okay, because I was thinking that
No.
when I was growing up, it was a
No, it was 3
Thursday,
days.
Friday.
Yes,
Saturday.
Thursday.
Was it 3?
Yeah.
So if you lost your first match on Thursday, and it takes till Friday night to see who's going to be in the finals.
Yeah.
I mean, was there you said you got a chance to wrestle back because that guy made it to the finals. Is there a chance a wrestler already left town at that point? Like I lost?
Could have. I Coach DeLeon said, "Hey, you got a chance potentially to get back in this if he goes to the finals, because you got to stay within weight, man." I said, "All right, I'll do it." By cracking, I got there.
Yeah.
So
that was my next question. Was like, what if you had to maintain weight? I'm sure too. I mean,
I did.
Yep, that's something that has changed over the years, and I think changed for the better.
Yeah.
Back in my day when I was wrestling, it was the same thing. You had to wait to see, anybody that lost first round, they had to wait and keep their weight down. But at the state tournament, they do give a little bit of allowance. That's changed over the years too, as to how much. But they expect you to have a little bit of allowance to still make weight. But
Yeah, I
it's not fun waiting.
No, I think they give you 1 pound every day, right? It was 1 pound
Yeah.
higher every day.
I think that's what it is still,
Yeah.
but yeah. And it was a 3-day tournament. Yeah, I remember that. Oh, Thursday, you always get the first match for sure. But
I was just thinking, like, some of these small schools that maybe don't have a big budget, they're like, oh geez, we gotta get a hotel room tonight just in case our guy has to wrestle or something. Or, I could see a school superintendent or AD going, yeah, let's just head home and let the other guy, get the win by forfeit or whatever. That's where my mind was going. That kind of.
Those are actually good questions, Dan, that you're asking about that. And believe it or not, it was that way at the NCAA tournament in the past too. And I mean, whoever came up with that pull through system it was not good.
That's
I
interesting.
remember when I had to weigh in at 145 before Christmas. I didn't like that very much, but then I had a pound at first day, pound at the second day, and the third day was March 1st. You got another pound for the month.
Right.
So I got to weigh 151 for the finals that Saturday morning for wrestling 145.
Nice.
So I kind of like that extra month allowance. So yeah, that was kind of nice.
And
Well,
back then you weighed in, you actually had to weigh in 1 hour after the last match. And
We weighed in the morning,
yeah.
before our
first day, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then after that you could weigh in the evening, because I remember going in Friday night, Greg Buttress and myself were the last two guys to make weight that year. The kid from Lisbon that wrestled Pat in the duels. But now they have changed the rules, which I think are wonderful for wrestling. They've taken the weight cutting out of it, and you weigh in either an hour or two, depending on either a duel or a tournament. So the weight cutting is not near as severe as what it once was, which I think has helped wrestling and keeps people much more excited about it.
Yeah. People can eat a little bit. I remember some of my high school buddies watching them eat a half a carrot at lunch. And I was like, how do you do that? Like I still don't have the self-control or discipline to do something like that, let alone a high school kid, but kudos to you guys for sticking with it. Let's move on to regional state here, or state duels here. You guys had to wrestle Lisbon in the first round. You guys lost that 32-23. Lisbon went on to beat Riceville in the finals by that exact same score of 32-23. So just kind of in general here, talk about, three of you guys won a state title that year. Paul, you made it in. Doug, you got third. Wrestling in the state duels, and just wrestling for Coach DeLeon, Coach Prehm. Talk about Lois a little bit. Just wrestling for Britt in general. Describe that year and your time in the Britt program. Just threw a whole
one
lot
thing,
at
you
there.
talk about the score of that Lisbon duel, and something they're batting around right now is just scoring. Nobody understands team scoring in a tournament, not even real wrestling people. And in dual meets, some ways of scoring just don't make sense. So there's an idea about cumulative scoring. Your match points are the actual points on the board. And so when you see a score, like, what did you say it was, Dan?
32-23.
That sort of sounds like not real close. But if you analyze it a little bit further, it was a really close duel. Doug's got a memory on him, and he can tell you about his match in that Lisbon duel. That that could have made a big swing in the score, just that alone. And so when you talk about moving on to talking about general comments and ideas, when I look back at my upbringing in the sport, and you talk about little rural town in northern Iowa, and I would put my coaching up against anybody anywhere, and I really mean that. Coach Al and Sanger kind of have that same aura about them, and the thing, but Coach Prehm, what he brought to that program, I've been around a lot of coaches, a lot of different rooms and things, but technically, Coach Prehm is as good as any technician that I've been exposed to, all the way through the college level. So it's just, it is a really, really fortunate upbringing in the sport that I just, it was really quite incredible in that way when you think about it. What we had at, Britt High School at the time, it was really I just feel very fortunate to have what I had.
Yeah, thank you, Pat.
Me
We,
too. I think you were trying to teach me the outside carry right after you broke your wrist or hurt it. Within a week or two. You said you took a month off. I don't think you, maybe from hard wrestling, but other than that, you're always trying to teach us better technique and more.
Yeah, it was fun. That's
More
what it's
moves.
about. And you guys, there was so much talent in the room that we were able to do those kind of things. And and that's with DeLeon to get you guys to believe that you can win matches and the little technical stuff, but it just made it an enjoyable thing. Going back to the weight cutting, though, I gotta tell Doug, I was a weight cutter. I wrestled 98 pounds and 105 when I was in high school, and 118 in college most of the time. But I was in Doug's shoes once, where I come back and we had a party or something. I knew there was way too much food there and good stuff. And there was a couple times I didn't make weight and I felt terrible about it. But I think we have to, blame DeLeon for making chimichangas, because you can't resist those things. And, so I didn't know that story, Eric. I couldn't remember it. I've been at it a long time, and some of my years get
Well, he kept on saying it'll be
together. There's so much. I've been very fortunate. What's that?
He kept on saying it'll be fine, Doug. It'll be fine.
It wasn't fine, yeah.
No. You know what though, and just to kind of comment a little bit on what Pat was saying and Don as well, and but diversity is a great thing as you kind of look at things, and one of the great kind of perspectives that I think Coach Prehm and DeLeon brought to the room was they had two different perspectives, and they both had great respect for each other, and it was kind of a unique experience that DeLeon kind of he was kind of the rah guy and got you to believe, and Coach Prehm was definitely the technician coming out of college, not many years removed, and it just kind of I think the point would be just the life lessons that we were able to learn, at a very small community in the school. Really, they are definitely life lessons, and you got to be thankful. And as we thank Coach Prehm and DeLeon, and you got to throw Coach, like I had mentioned earlier, Coach Sanger, even though I didn't play football, just the amount of respect that I had from him. You don't have to participate in a sport to understand that somebody runs a really good program and is a genuinely wonderful man. And I still say to this day, I probably learned as much from Coach Sanger just being in gym classes than I did, from, and that's not saying that I didn't learn a ton from Coach Prehm and DeLeon, but Coach Sanger was truly just a wonderful man. And it's wonderful that Coach Prehm and DeLeon, they got along so well, and they were very different. And that, I think that's what made them gel so well and the team do so well. So just a shout out to those two gentlemen for giving us so much.
Don, did someone say you wrestled at Iowa?
Yeah.
How'd you do with Coach Gable there? What kind of success did you see as a Hawkeye?
Not enough, I guess. I don't know, 15 and 16 or 16, 15.
Was that you wrestled varsity at 1 year, or what'd that look like for you?
Yeah. I think my freshman year I wrestled varsity. Oh, I just remember getting beat in the Big Tens. I beat Arizona State All-American, and I guess I wrestled a couple. I wrestled Marty Morgan and who's that guy from Okie State? Two-timer from Okie State. But I didn't beat
Chris
them.
Barnes.
Yeah, Chris Barnes. It's closer to him than Marty. I had a little weight cutting problem against Marty. But well.
Was Coach Gable pretty aware of Coach DeLeon and the Britt program at that time? I would assume, with how much success he had over the years.
Oh, I'd say so, but he never really talked about it.
Pretty focused in the moment. Gable seemed to be. So
Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
To me, there's pride in Britt and Wes Hancock. Just I tell people, well, how come you did so well and stuff? Geez, look at the history. Back in history, I got old wrestling books in my shed right now. Britt had most state champs. Well, I don't know where in the top 2 or 3 they used to put it in there. They don't anymore, but that just gave me a great sense of pride to even wrestle in Britt, and then to have the great coaches. I have nephews that wrestled hard, wrestled summer and everything, and my brother said, "Well, what's wrong with my nephew?" I was like, "He's getting mad at the coaches and stuff." I said, "So DeLeon always said he made a nickel an hour coaching wrestling." So it's a love for the sport. I said, "Well, what do they got? I don't even know how many schools, but hundreds of schools. You're not going to get the best coaches." And I said, "We were fortunate. Me, even you, my brothers, we were all very fortunate to have great coaches to make us better." And that's how it was at Iowa too. It's like once the winning started, it's expected.
Yep.
And in your head, it's a mentality, I think. So I think it just kind of rubs off, and the more people you have like that, the more it rubs off on the others.
I remember when I was in grade school, and Mrs. DeLeon would put all those big banners up in the grade school that showed the district champs, the sectional champs, the state place winners or whatever. And you saw that growing up, going through grade school, you'd see the success that they had posted, and posted in the grade school, and everybody saw it. So it's kind of the way it went, I guess, or whatever. I mean, you saw the success when you were young. So
Yep, that motivation was there right in front of you. How many of you other guys wrestled in college? Who else went to college and wrestled? Did you, Pat?
Yeah. So Ron, Doug, and I, and Don wrestled in college. Yep.
Where'd you wrestle?
I wrestled also at Iowa, and then transferred to Nebraska, Omaha.
Okay. How about you, Doug?
I wrestled at Waldorf 2 years, and I wrestled at Mankato State, Coach DeLeon's college.
Nice. And Coach Prehm, where did you say you wrestled in college? I forgot what you said earlier.
I wrestled at UNI.
UNI, that's right. Nice.
Yep.
Yeah. And I am 0-1 in my career as a 3rd grade wrestler, and I still have nightmares about that day to this day, 20 some years later. So again, I have a lot of respect for wrestlers. It wasn't my thing. So when I don't know wrestling that well, but when I talk to wrestlers, I'm just like, you guys are a different breed of people, and I have a whole lot of respect for you. So yeah, we're going to wrap this up. Thanks again to my 14 sponsors, as always, for giving to the Sanger Legacy Fund. My next 5 podcasts, I have Doug Sickles coming up next week. He is a former Kanawha teacher and coach at West Hancock Middle School. If we win Friday night against North Lynn in the quarterfinals, Jay and Kevin and I are going to do a semifinal preview by request. We had several people mad at us that we didn't do one after the second round. So we're going to do one hopefully after an Eagle win. Then I have Steph Arey. She's a state track champion. Brian Benning, former coach. Steve Perkins, and then Don Hiscocks will get us into December, it looks like. So any last minute things, guys, as we're wrapping this up that you didn't get to say earlier that you want to throw out there that you just thought of or trying to find the right time for?
I would
Well, I
like
just wanna-
to, if you don't mind, I'd just like to say this has been really fun for me to see these old guys, you 50-some-year-old guys, and I had a great time at Britt and the successes we had, but it was just a great place. And I wasn't there a lot of years, but I've got a lot of good memories. And it was good to see all of you guys in this little podcast. And thank you, Dan, for putting it together.
You bet.
Yeah, I just want to, on that vein, just to really appreciate what you're doing, Dan, for this and given this opportunity. I mean, it's so good to see you guys and reconnect, and I just appreciate that. And again, I mean, I've really you talk about your 50th one. You don't know how much further. I think you need to keep going and going and going with these because they're awesome.
That's the goal. I want to get to 110, I think. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. So I do have a question though. Who has one last match left in them still? Anybody on this podcast have one more match they could wrestle here? Coach Prehm, I knew that was the answer.
I can tell you, my son just finished college wrestling last year, and part of I wanted to do one last drill match with him, so not even a live match. And boy, I'm done. I'm no more.
I want to take on Ron and some takedowns, but I want him to take a shower first. I could smell something through this podcast.
First day on the farm.
Yeah, I like them farm boys.
I get out of this combine, it's on.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid you were going to say.
How far is Britt from New Hampton? Just give about an hour or so. He'll be there. So.
Yeah, I think I'm out of town that day. Sorry.
I don't know if you guys watched the John and Brent Hagen episode I did last year, but Brent said, "Oh, I got one more match in me," and John looked at him and says, "No, you don't." I told him, "Nope." And then it just killed me on Facebook the other day. Kerry Wallen, the Hall of Fame basketball player from Britt, she posted how excited she was for Hallmark Christmas movies to come on TV. And then John Hagen replied, "Me too, I love Hallmark Christmas movies." And I'm like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? So I got to get on with these wrestlers and hope that none of those comments get made. John, I don't know, that was kind of floored by that. So anyway, off topic there, but all right, fellas. Well, thanks for coming on. It was a good time reminiscing about some Britt wrestling back in the late 80s. So I appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bet,
All
guys.
right,
you, Dan.
Thank you.
Go Eagles.
Yeah, go Eagles.